What if I told you that some of the most talented musicians of the 70s vanished without a trace? While Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd dominated the decade, 5 incredible rock bands burned bright, flamed out, and disappeared into the shadows of music history. These weren't your typical garage bands. They featured legendary drummers from the Jimi Hendrix Experience, guitar virtuosos who shattered gender barriers, and theatrical frontmen who set the stage on fire. Literally. Mitch Mitchell, the powerhouse drummer who helped Jimi Hendrix create some of rock's most iconic moments, teams up with Mike Pinera, the guitarist behind Iron Butterfly's psychedelic sound. Add a female lead guitarist in an era when women were rarely seen wielding axes on stage, and you've got Ramatam, a band that should have conquered the world. Ramatam was notable for having April Lawton, a female lead guitarist, which was virtually unheard of in 1972. While Hendrix's Purple Haze was still echoing through record stores, Mitchell and Hendrix had been offered spots in the band Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but Mitchell chose a different path. He wanted to create something new, something that would push boundaries. Tom Dowd produced their self-titled debut album in 1972 and was quoted as saying this album was one of his all-time favorites. Dowd wasn't just any producer. He was the man behind classics by Cream, Derek and the Dominoes, and countless Atlantic Records legends. When Tom Dowd called something his favorite, people should have listened. But here's where the story gets tragic. They were an opening act for Emerson, Lake and Palmer at a number of concerts, playing to massive audiences who were witnessing something revolutionary. Yet despite having one of rock's most respected producers, a drummer who had shaped the sound of an entire generation, and a groundbreaking female guitarist, Ramatam couldn't break through the noise. The band recorded a second album, but by 1974, they had vanished. The lineup was completed with keyboard player Tommy Sullivan and bassist Russ Smith, but even this talented roster couldn't save them from the cruel mathematics of the music industry. They remain one of rock's greatest what-ifs, a supergroup that deserved superstardom but got silence instead. Some bands are remembered for their hits, others for their longevity. Fuzzy Duck is remembered for being absolutely, utterly bizarre in the most beautiful way possible. They were a collection of musicians who seemed to exist in their own parallel universe. The band featured Mick Hawksworth from the heavy prog outfit Andromeda and the blues rock band Killing Floor. Roy Charlin brought his credentials from the legendary Crazy World of Arthur Brown, a band known for theatrical performances that bordered on the surreal. Paul Francis rounded out the lineup with his experience from Tucky Buzzard and Tranquility. Their 1971 self-titled album was prog rock taken to its absolute extreme. Imagine if Pink Floyd had decided to collaborate with a jazz ensemble while under the influence of a fever dream. The album featured compositions that shifted between gentle acoustic passages and crushing heavy sections, often within the same song. But Fuzzy Duck's greatest tragedy was their timing. In 1971, the music world wasn't ready for their level of experimentation. Progressive rock was still finding its identity, and Fuzzy Duck was operating several years ahead of the curve. They were making music that would influence bands throughout the decade, but they barely lasted 12 months. Their album became a collector's item almost immediately after they disbanded. Today, original pressings sell for hundreds of dollars, sought after by prog rock enthusiasts who recognize them as pioneers of a sound that would later influence everyone from Yes to King Crimson. Fuzzy Duck left behind a blueprint for musical exploration that still resonates today. Kingdom Come were a British rock band fronted by Arthur Brown. The band was recognized for Brown's theatrical and operatic singing, and a sound that drew from psychedelic and prog rock. If you thought rock concerts were wild in the 70s, you hadn't seen Arthur Brown's Kingdom Come. Arthur Brown was already a legend by 1970. His 1968 hit, Fire, had reached #1 in the UK, and his live performances were the stuff of legend, literally setting his headpiece ablaze while screaming about flames. But Kingdom Come was different. This wasn't just theatrical rock. This was Brown pushing the boundaries of what music could be. Kingdom Come's albums were Galactic Zoo Dossier, the self-titled Kingdom Come in 1972, and Journey in 1973. Brown stated in an interview with an English music magazine that the three albums were intended to present a thematic progression. They were creating a musical trilogy about the human condition. This combination made the band a hit on Britain's festival circuit. Thousands of festival-goers witnessed Brown's otherworldly performances, his voice ranging from operatic beauty to primal screams, backed by a band that could shift from space rock to progressive jazz in the span of a single song. But here's the cruel irony. Lack of record sales, indifference from the mainstream music industry killed what could have been a revolutionary band. They were too weird for radio, too theatrical for critics, and too ahead of their time for mass audiences. They focused on the state of humankind, but humankind wasn't ready for Kingdom Come's vision. Kingdom Come pioneered the use of drum machines in rock music, predicting the electronic revolution that would dominate the 80s. They created concept albums before the term was widely understood. They were performance art disguised as rock music, and they vanished just as the world was beginning to catch up to their vision. When a band breaks up, most musicians move on to new projects. John Heisman, the driving force behind the jazz-rock fusion pioneers Colosseum, had a different idea. He decided to resurrect the name, add a Roman numeral, and create something that would surpass the original. Colosseum II formed in 1975, emerging from the ashes of the original Colosseum with a mission to push jazz-rock fusion even further into unexplored territory. Their debut album, Strange New Flesh, wasn't just a collection of songs, it was a statement of intent. This was prog rock with jazz sophistication, played by musicians who could seamlessly blend technical virtuosity with emotional depth. The album featured complex compositions that required multiple listens to fully appreciate. Heisman's drumming was thunderous, yet precise, creating rhythmic foundations that allowed the other musicians to explore musical territories that few bands dared to enter. They were making music for musicians, compositions that challenged both the players and the listeners. But therein lay their problem. While bands like Genesis and Yes were finding ways to make prog rock accessible to mainstream audiences, Colosseum II remained uncompromisingly complex. Their music demanded attention in an era when radio wanted simplicity. They were creating art in a marketplace that wanted products. By 1978, the band members had scattered to other projects. They left behind a small but devoted following and a catalog of music that would influence jazz-rock fusion for decades. Their albums became treasured artifacts for collectors who understood that sometimes the most important music is the music that doesn't sell. Some bands self-destruct because of creative differences, others because of ego clashes. Armageddon managed to do both while also dealing with personal demons that would ultimately consume one of rock's most talented lineups. The band featured Keith Relf, the haunting voice behind the Yardbirds' most experimental work. Martin Pugh brought his guitar wizardry from Steamhammer, while Louis Senemo contributed his bass mastery from Renaissance. Bobby Caldwell, fresh from the heavy psych outfit Captain Beyond, completed the rhythm section. On paper, this was a supergroup that should have dominated the mid-70s hard rock scene. In reality, they were a collection of brilliant musicians struggling with the pressures of the music industry and personal demons. Relf's asthma problems plagued the band's live performances, while management issues created constant friction behind the scenes. Their self-titled debut album showcased their potential heavy riffs that would influence the emerging metal scene, combined with the progressive sensibilities that each member brought from their previous bands. They were creating music that bridged the gap between blues-based hard rock and the more experimental sounds emerging in the underground. But Armageddon was plagued by the same issues that destroyed many bands of the era. Drug problems within the band created unreliable performances and erratic behavior. Their management was more interested in quick profits than long-term career development. And Keith Relf's health issues meant that touring essential for building a following became increasingly difficult. The band managed to record just one album and play a handful of live shows before imploding in 1976. Tragically, Keith Relf died just 2 years later when electrocuted himself while tuning a guitar which was not properly earthed, ensuring that Armageddon would never reunite. They remain a testament to the fragility of artistic collaboration and the cruel mathematics of rock and roll success. These 5 bands represent more than just footnotes in rock history. They're reminders that musical genius doesn't always translate to commercial success. While their contemporaries were selling millions of records and playing stadium shows, these groups were pushing boundaries, experimenting with sounds, and creating music that was decades ahead of its time. Ramatam pioneered the integration of female musicians in hard rock. Fuzzy Duck explored sonic territories that wouldn't be revisited until the grunge era. Kingdom Come created performance art that predicted the theatrical rock of the 80s. Colosseum II developed jazz rock fusion techniques that influenced countless musicians. And Armageddon showed that sometimes the most powerful music comes from the most fragile collaborations. Their albums now sell for hundreds of dollars on the collector's market. Their songs appear on compilation albums celebrating the forgotten gems of the 70s, and their influence can be heard in everything from progressive metal to alternative rock. These weren't just bands that started and ended in the 70s. They were musical time capsules that captured the experimental spirit of an era when anything seemed possible. They remind us that sometimes the most important music is the music that doesn't make it to the top of the charts. So the next time you're digging through vinyl crates or exploring obscure corners of streaming platforms, remember these 5 bands. They may have vanished from the spotlight, but their music continues to inspire, influence, and amaze anyone willing to listen. Because sometimes the greatest rock and roll stories are the ones that were never told. If this deep dive into rock's forgotten corners sparked your curiosity, hit that like button and let us know in the comments which of these bands surprised you the most. And don't forget to subscribe for more explorations into the hidden history of rock and roll. Until next time, keep digging, keep discovering, and keep the music alive.